Johnny Blackburn is here with us next. He is one of my man muses, personal man muses, meaning he inspires me as a man in the world. And he specializes in developmental coaching, healing for individuals, relationship counseling, and spiritual development training for mystics. So this man really brings in so many aspects of what it means to be a whole human being. He hits every level: the spiritual, the emotional, the psychological, and the physical. He brings in Taoist practices, mystical practices, and he really helps people go through massive transformation and up level to a higher sense of spirituality in their lives.
He's an incredible author, and he's got some really cool decks that apply strategies and experiences and embodiment around intimacy. One of the things that I just loved about Johnny's work is what a great therapist he is. And I can just imagine sitting in the presence of his therapeutic process and just getting a lot of liberation and freedom. So here is your chance to
tune in, turn on, and fall in love with Johnny Blackburn.
Fall in love with Johnny Blackburn.
Welcome to the Sex Reimagined podcast, where sex is shame-free and pleasure-forward. Let's get into the show.
So we are here with Johnny Blackburn. I love this man. I love the way he thinks. I love the way he weaves so many aspects of what it means to be a whole human being in the world, especially in intimacy and relating. So we're going to be weaving a lot of stuff together today with Johnny. And he is going to be sharing with us what it means to use relationship as a spiritual practice.
Yeah. Welcome, Johnny.
Thank you, Lynn. Willow. Honored to be here. Excited for this. I think we met a couple years ago. It was a pop-up music experience on the cliffs of La Jolla at sunset.
That's right.
Epic.
That's where we all met.
2020.
Yeah.
And I remember dancing was great and great conversations were had by us. Deep psychology and human potential and sexuality and relationship with spiritual practice. I mean, I think we were like talking for like well over an hour, and I'm looking forward to like version 2.
Yeah, we went like right into shop talk, and it's always so fun to like find like-minded educators who are fascinated and passionate about sexuality and relationship and spirituality. And one of the things we've all studied, although slightly different variations on, is the Reichian pattern types. And we could geek out on that for hours because it's so rich.
Oh, it's fascinating.
And we wanted to kind of tap into today for our audience that maybe has never heard of personality pattern types or anything of that nature. One of the things that's really powerful to look into is when energy hit our bodies or our nervous system that puts us into overwhelm or triggers us or causes a response that has us maybe withdraw or go numb or leave our body or fight. You know, like there's all these life circumstances, right, that kind of derail us from feeling our essence and our true loving selves. And that interplay is always going to happen in relationships. And all of these things tend to get established in early childhood because they were good survival mechanisms. And now as we're grown adults, we're starting to look at it and go, oh, I hate the way I react that way, you know, or it destabilizes a really important relationship that we don't want to lose. And Johnny, I know that you teach a lot of content that is similar to this, and I thought maybe we could just dive in there.
So rich. I'm really interested in presence and connection, and I think we're alive in a time where we have access to so much information, YouTube and Instagram and workshops and books, and so it's really easy to consume, and oftentimes that's an important first step. And then often people have the experience that at a certain point they realize, well, it's not just what I know, but what I'm able to embody. And that's the big move from my relationship as a concept or a thing to my relationship as a living, felt sense of connection. And so that's where the body states that you're talking about, Leah, really come in line. Because when I'm feeling numb, and so here I'm sort of like open, right? And when the tone of my face and the chest go numb, my partner or my children actually can't register feeling connected to me. And so here, when we start to get into more of the embodied aspect of personal development, our felt sense of aliveness in the front of our bodies is really, really important, not only because this is where we feel connection and love, but it's also where we feel joy and gratitude and beauty and passion and the aliveness.
Yeah. So like one of the things I really notice is when I'm hurting or I'm in a conflict, the tendency to be separate, right? We feel separate. And I actually think like if we were to simplify the definition of depression, it would be feeling separate. It's like feeling separate from your God, feeling separate from your loved ones, feeling isolated and alone.
Right.
And when we can catch ourselves in that separateness, then we can sort out what we need in order to come back to connectedness.
Right.
And I imagine as a therapist working with individuals and couples, you see repetition, right? And how people become separate.
Sure.
Are there like themes that you've noticed, especially with couples?
Oh, totally. And I think one of the things that I appreciate in our conversation, Willow, is where we're talking about like the location of where we sense and experience things. So oftentimes when this area here is relaxed and open and we feel a sense of warmth, like that's where I can actually feel connected to you and to all of life. And so oftentimes when that's kind of closed and contracted, whether I'm afraid of being judged, afraid of being rejected, whether that is I feel shame and I'm like not in a place where I'm able to receive love and connection, whatever the case may be, I'm actually like anatomically inhibiting myself from feeling you and taking you in. And so the result of that is going to be the experience of feeling more separate or isolated or contracted.
Yeah. So there's a real value in being able to somatically drop into your sensation in order to access this level of presence that you're presencing for us right now, so that you can actually attune. I know attunement is a big word in your world, so that you can actually attune to the other person through your own sense of truth.
Oftentimes when I'm working with a couple, when I first meet them, I'll ask them a simple question like, what's one thing you appreciate about the other person? And it's a simple question. It's a love language, but there's a lot going on beyond just the question. So I want to see their nervous system's ability to actually make eye contact and connect with a person when they're speaking versus are they in their mind and just talking to you theory, so that they turn to the person and actually connect with them and sort of almost transmit the appreciation in the heart. And then how is the other person able to receive that, right? Sometimes people have a block to receiving. And so a very simple exercise illuminates a lot. Secondly, maybe I have some resentment and it's actually, I'm inhibiting, there's a part of me that's inhibited from authentically giving them appreciation right now. And it's something, there's some repair work that's needed before my heart can open and I can authentically give them appreciation. So that's a very simple example of doing a normal human thing in partnership, like giving appreciation, and how open our nervous systems enable to give and receive that.
And so when you've got a couple who, they can't make the eye contact, they're not transmitting from their heart, they're stuck in that, they can barely even come up with words to how they appreciate their partner, even though they've been, creating a family for the long haul. Like, how do you support them in dropping into their bodies in that moment so they can get out of their heads?
I really respect people's autonomy. And so I find asking them questions about their experiences not only guiding, but it's also empowering them to become aware and learn how to do that on their own. So I think there's definitely some skill, and I have a master's in psychology and I've done a lot of trainings, but there's also sort of an art and a science to it. And sometimes intuition or attuning to that person's state and asking them what it's like inside of them, like allows them to become aware of something that maybe they were only subconsciously aware of. And in doing so, you're sort of like there's something about presence where you're witnessed and you speak to it that allows it to sort of open and unfold a little bit. And so that would be an example of like I might ask them a question about their experience that then they're able to either corroborate or correct, but it invites them into more sensation or invites them into more intimacy with themselves.
And is that a question that is directed towards a past conflict that they're exploring within the session, or is that more in context to what are they feeling right now in this moment?
What are they feeling right now in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we're saying the body is the ultimate truth meter. Like the body moment to moment is showing like well, some people think the body's a subconscious mind. And in that way, like the openness or closure or the aliveness, um, or the relaxation intention, that sort of like tell us a lot about how aware I am, how alive I am, and how open to connect I am.
So I imagine there's a lot of people that don't necessarily have a strong connection to being in their body, which would have that being a difficult thing to answer. What's it like in your experience with people who are struggling, to come up with language?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, what is sensation, and exactly where do I feel it? What are some of the common responses from people who have a hard time actually like latching on to what's going on in their body?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if you have any friends that are really into wine tasting or any friends that are big surfers, but there's a whole language to those sports. And, I'm not so good in either, but I enjoy both of them. And I do both of them. And so when I hang around certain friends, I just pay attention and ask them. And as they're describing their experience, and I slowly learn from them. And I think that same thing, what we did as children, learning ideally from those around us, or even now, whether it's a trusted, counselor or friend, that there's a way which them helping attune to us and maybe offering a word that, again, respecting their autonomy, they can check and see if that word matches and is true. Like I find that process really helpful, right? So I might give them words like, does it feel like this? Or what's it like inside you right now? If you're able to describe that, what words would you use? And permission to try and take your time and mess up. And we create a lot of safety in there. And we just give them a context of like, this is something we can all learn, but we want to make it safe to try and let our nervous system kind of learn how to do it.
And so, whether somebody is adept at feeling into their bodies or if they're just learning it for the first time, this is a really foundational piece to relationship and deep relating as a spiritual practice, because of this presence that comes when you are able to navigate from an embodied place. And yes, it is true. Most of our society is more valuing of this prefrontal cortex, but there's so much more beneath the surface. And so, tell us a little bit more about how this opens up to spiritual practice.
Yeah. Well, I think when we get into a space of deeper presence, it sort of wants to open places that are not open. And it kind of wants to love places that we don't yet love. And so whether it's with a partner, connecting in deeper presence, or whether it's with a counselor connecting deeper presence, like certain things may have a tendency to come up. And so back to what we were talking about a little bit ago, Leah. So if I'm sensing that their diaphragm, like a pattern of tension just came up in their diaphragm, I might ask them, hey, can I ask you a question? Does it feel a little tight right here just now? And then that permissions them to sort of check and directs them where to look. And I gave them the words. So then that's helping them to do it, for example. Or do you notice a little ache right here? Well, can we feel that together?
Okay, that's great. So you're sort of helping them feel into where they hold tension that may point us in the direction of where there's a contraction.
Yes, and it may be chronic tension, but more often it's actually something that just came up in that moment.
Gotcha. So it's emotional tension, not necessarily like aches and pains in your body. Although I'm sure that aches and pains could give you some
information. What I find when doing this work with people is there's so much medicine in that place of tension. Like there's so much juice, there's so much information in there. So when they're able to go in and be like, okay, it feels hot, it feels sharp, it feels tight, it feels all these things. And then we get them a little bit closer to it. It's like, well, what does it look like? And maybe they're not visual, maybe they don't see anything, but then they are able to kind of bring it out of their tissues, their soma, their solar plexus in this case, and kind of unpack it, massage it out, lay it on the table, look at it, and really dispel a lot of what's not important and what's not theirs to carry or hold on to, so that they can just have what's left, which is like a lesson often.
Well, that's another level of taking on other people's or storing other people's patterns. We can talk about that maybe in a moment. But what you just said there, I find sometimes naming it and feeling it for 30 seconds in presence is enough for a lot of emotions or patterns to be able to release on its own, particularly in the co-regulation of another person's presence. And then I find there's some situations where after you've been feeling it for a minute or so, it still hasn't released. And in that, what Willow, you just said, I find that often there's like a packet of wisdom in there that those sensations have come up to sort of give them information to help them in their life.
Mm.
And so if you've been feeling it together and there's not a protector avoiding the feeling, but if you're really letting yourself feel it, oftentimes it releases after, 30 seconds or a minute. And if it hasn't done that, that's an opportunity to ask it what it's about. And the tendency there, the thing for people to be careful of is they don't go up in their mind to analyze what it is. It's almost like they drop their attention or their local awareness into the sensations themselves, and they ask the sensations what it's about. And usually it speaks very simply. I feel frustrated that this, or part of me scared that.
It sounds like then you're not headed for the story. You're headed for where it is that they're feeling something in their body, allowing them the space to be in the moment to feel that. And oftentimes it dissipates, it moves, something else opens, something else arises, and you don't have to go digging for the story. And if that's not the case, if the sensation persists, then there may be a gem in there that wants to be teased open.
9 times out of 10 it's protection, in my experience. I'm here to protect, which leads us into this word pattern that we're using quite a bit here in this episode. Let's talk a little bit about patterns or moments of trigger and where they might come from in a whole lifespan, and how those can really truly be eradicated with this type of work, with relating as a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
I think as people sort of reflect on their life, I think a lot of people, honestly, they're probably listening to this, and certainly my life has looked like this thing keeps on happening, right? Like this behavior keeps on arising, and it feels like it's screwing up my life.
Like I keep attracting unavailable partners, or I keep having the same argument with my partner over and over. 10 years later, it's the same damn argument.
Or you're getting like the same feedback from the people who love you, right? Like for me, I tend to, I have a hard time containing upset within my own body. So it kind of leaks out. It kind of goes into the room. I often tell people, you got to duck and cover when Leah's pissed. I'm not proud of that. I don't like it. I feel like that happens. And in the moment, I feel filled with righteousness. Like something's not right. And I have the right to say it's not right. But then it just like smacks the whole room down. And then there's a lot of repair afterward. And so as I've been studying the pattern work, it's like how to minimize the upset having such a strong impact within the environment, and therefore, getting better at that not being my first defense mechanism. Well, it's really like my fourth defense mechanism when something else isn't being heard, but it's the most painful. And it's the thing that I feel like drives my desire to want to be better at my relationships, my friendships, my marriage, because I know that my actions are hurting somebody else. And I know how much it hurts me to have that reaction to begin with. For me personally, it's tied into like a feeling of self-loathing, even a feeling of embarrassment. And so, my choice is to take personal responsibility for that. But that would be what would drive me to getting some therapeutic help, or to want to go to a seminar that allows me to unpack, like, why am I like this? Why am I like this? So maybe we could start there.
How do you guys feel about the context that some relationships are in a phase where they're in need of repair, or there's a degree of crisis, and there's maybe some breaches the container or, a high level of fighting? That's where the repair is the sort of priority for the relationship. And then I find that there's another level where reconnection is kind of the priority, and things are pretty good, but there's often patterns of disconnection and patterns of communication or criticism and the like that sort of take it out of that state of goodness. And so they're learning some skills is really useful, and as well as bringing back the aliveness so they can actually feel the sense of connection. And then I find there's a third category of relationship as spiritual practice where things are really good. And there's a lot of skills on board. Sure, there's moments where, we have our unconsciousness, but for the most part, we're wanting to use our relationship to not only actualize our greater potential, but to live from greater and greater loving presence together.
Yeah, I like those three categories. I feel like that is a place where people are often like seeking from, right? You have some people who, from the spiritual standpoint, they want to have more profound experiences within their connection. They know that there's something deep to like deepen, they want to go to these cosmic places with each other, and they want more skills on how to do that. And then you have people who's, they're in trouble. They're in trouble with their relationships, and they know that if they don't find connection soon, they're going to head in the direction that is going to have them go their separate ways, right?
Yeah.
And then there's those people who are on a personal journey where they want to be better at their life. So which one of those do you want to dive into?
Well, what might be really cool is if we could connect the dots there in the way that
Cool.
Our healing and embodied development are actually essential for like authentic embodied spiritual awakening.
Connect those dots for us, Johnny. Take us on a ride.
Well, as we've been talking about some of these patterns, all of these different various patterns have corresponding body states. So whether it's numbness or whether it's kind of stoic shutdown or whether it's, shield up and attack, whether it's sort of self-blame and self sort of like endure, whether it's sort of put on my perfect straight jacket and like feel like I have to earn love to be able to relax open my heart. Like regardless of which one, like all of these patterns require a certain degree of self-awareness, a certain degree of healing to be able to relax our body, particularly the front, be able to open our heart and be able to circulate the aliveness. And when we say aliveness, we're talking about life force or chi or energy. So I often put like aliveness, relaxation, and openness, right?
Okay.
And so I can have a lot of aliveness, but a lot of times when people are pissed, their heart's closed. So it's actually a practice that we can, and there's tension, right? And I'm not able to be relaxed and sense the other person. So there's actually a practice where I can do, and I want to make a distinction. So anger, I love how you said you're working on containing your upset. Because I think one distinction between anger and aggression is that if I think about my own bubble, like I can feel, okay, I'm really pissed.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about this? So I was angry in my own bubble, but I didn't dump it out as aggression or violence onto you. And so that's a really, really powerful move for couples to be able to learn to circulate the aliveness, but stay open-hearted and keep their breath open so that they can de-escalate. And, I think that took about 30 seconds, but I actually used my breath and the openness of my system to sort of calm down the anger and not spill it out on you. And now we can talk about it I can share my vulnerability that really hurt, or, I'm feeling this need not getting met, or I felt like my boundary was disrespected. And then it's going to be a lot more connected and productive in that conversation.
And knowing you were also circulating it through particular channels in your body and meridians so that it wasn't all steamed up and stuck right here or right here.
In that same way that the masculine kind of gets more energy during sex, tends to get the energy pooled up in their genitals and then needs a release. Like in that same way that there's the capacity as we open what's called the central channel. If any of you listeners have heard of the chakras, there's a channel from the sort of the base of the genitalia all the way up to the crown of the head. And the more healing we do and the more kind of yoga and breath work and energetic practice we do, we're able to actually feel this. And then we're actually able to open that center. So it's almost like a hollow tube full of energy and aliveness. And then that is one of the factors that has the energy not just pool in our genitals or in anger in our chest and fist and face, but it is actually able to kind of circulate that. So in that same way, the ability to circulate anger and not spill it out, right, is that same way to circulate the sexual energy during sex and to be able to access much, much higher and deeper states rather than just it reaches a quick climax and then I sort of ejaculate.
So help me with the word aliveness, because when I think of aliveness is it's emotional variety, right? So even to me, adrenaline can be a feeling of like, so alive, and adrenaline can have sort of a negative feeling that's like too much coffee. And adrenaline can also be like you just got off a roller coaster and what a blast. So it sounds like when you're using the word aliveness, that it's more leaning into a more positive state of awareness. Can you say just a little bit more about what aliveness means to you when you're using it?
So when paired with openness and relaxation, it changes a little bit. And I know I want to just say,
Gotcha.
I know Willa works a lot with hormone balance. And I think with emotion, there's an interplay of our internal biochemistry with subtle energy. Now, subtle energy, we don't yet have the instrumentation scientifically to measure it, but we sure know subjectively when there's a really close, intimate connection, or when we really have good rapport with someone you met. There's almost like this subtle, again, aliveness or energetic resonance when we're really connecting and vibing with someone. And similarly, we can walk into a room and nobody's speaking and they're standing still, but you can sense that there's anger, that there's been a fight, right? And so there's a certain capacity to sense the energy. Or we walk into a party and you can tell if it's like it's a good party or not. And so that, like, this matches, this is a very integral part of our subjective human experience, even though we haven't evolved yet scientifically to be able to have instrumentation to measure. So some people get a little tripped up on energy or chi. And so I tend to use aliveness as sort of a blanket term. Now, that said, I can have a physical aliveness of what would be called my biofield or my meridians or the chakras, but I can also have there's also an energy of emotion. We know that anger is very enlivening, right? And very, very powerful. And there's also an energy to sadness and frustration, right? And so in that way, it feels like there's an interplay between the subtle energy of our physical aliveness with the subtle energy of our emotional experience. And that I sort of say is aliveness.
That's really helpful. Yeah, great. So I just can orient it into my own mind. There's an aliveness that is connected to feeling closed, versus the aliveness that feels open and more relaxed. And like it's kind of like another way of saying you've had a good meal and it helps you feel like so yummy, and you feel
Right.
more like that meal gave you vitality, versus
Right.
when you might have had a meal that tasted good but really wasn't good for you and now you got indigestion.
Heavy. Or how about when
Yeah.
we're flirting, right? There's a beautiful
Yeah.
aliveness and sexiness to that, like, energy of attraction, or that aliveness of attraction.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you've had a really good lovemaking session and you're just feeling so alive, it's very different
Blissy,
than if you're
yeah.
pissed off at your partner and you're feeling so alive.
And it's also one of those things where if you have an experience, sometimes you don't even have a reference point for it. Like, one of the most beautiful things
Right.
is when I'm working with clients and it's maybe been years or decades since they've actually had the felt experience of an open heart. And in the vulnerability and the openness and the warmth and like the loving nakedness, it's just such an exquisite experience. And yet when we're walking around with a closed heart, as I did for most of my life and many of us do, it's really limiting how much of the energy or aliveness that flows through all things can sort of fill us. And so one
Mm.
of the things for some people, because we can certainly make love and be more closed, you know, but for some people, that's an experience where it's actually safer for them to open. And so part of that feeling, or particularly on the feminine side of feeling that fullness, is that some of those sort of channels or pathways through which the energy or the aliveness can normally circulate can be more opened. And I think it's really beautiful when we hold it as that lovemaking was an opportunity for me to really connect more deeply with my partner and open our hearts and deepen in our capacity to love. And it's also a chance for me to be more open in my own and relaxed in my embodied experience as I open more pathways. And then the other thing is, as those pathways open and as I learn to quiet my mind and relax the sense of self, and I'm actually able to feel the presence that lives through all things. And so in that way, lovemaking can actually be a really beautiful practice for connection and growth and feeling spirit.
And so in that moment, it's an enlightened moment. It's an enlightened experience because you're feeling the energy of everything.
When you sense that someone is in pattern and you sense that, do you feel like there's a method to helping some patterns get out that are different from other patterns?
Totally.
Yeah.
I don't know how you think about it, but I think on our side, on the practitioner side, or frankly, on the partner side, acceptance is the first step. Because if I'm actually uncomfortable and wanting to change that person, or if it's a part of myself that I'm not okay with, it creates a sort of anxiety and trying to fix that, even if not registered consciously by the other person, subconsciously, it's almost like the finger trap, the way that the straw's wound. When we try to get out of it, we get stuck. And when we kind of face it and go towards it and accept it, it sort of the fibers of it relax and we can release it. And so whether it's an emotion state or a pattern, find the same thing, that like my job is really like knowing that inside of myself and feel like, yeah, I too can be numb sometimes, or I too can close my heart, or I too can feel shame. And I really meet them in the humanness of the, like, me too. And I don't need to change you. I'm cool with you exactly as you are.
Yeah, it takes a lot of the judgment and the criticism out of it, because it's so easy to point the finger. It's so easy to turn it on the other person and blame. And we as practitioners know that that's the moment. That's the moment that you've got to look inside and see what is it.
Well, I think that's also like a habit we can all build. Yeah. Like the tendency is to turn away versus turn towards. And so even in that disconnect, it's making a choice to go, in this disconnection, I'm still going to turn towards.
And just to define terms, I want to make sure I'm on the same page. So I think of intimacy as closeness. And so we can have physical closeness, just sitting next to somebody, a friend, or hugging someone. And we can have emotional closeness, which a lot of times communication can help to, and connection can kind of help to foster. And then there's sexual closeness, which the more physically and emotionally close and open we are, the more likely to be deeply sexual close. Are we on the same page with that?
It sounds pretty accurate.
Yeah, I was thinking more like, from a couple standpoint. The Gottmans call it a regrettable moment. And that's what they call a fight. When you have like a regrettable moment and now you are wanting to like, okay, how do we get back? Because feeling separate doesn't feel good. And so if you've got two people that are committed to going, okay, we know that shit's going to happen and we're not always going to agree and there's going to be conflict, right? That's a natural part of just being in relationship. What are the strategies that we can co-create so that we can help each other? And maybe that's not, and when I say help each other, that doesn't mean solving it for each other. It can be simply, how can I understand myself and how can I understand where you're coming from? And from that place, I think then there's our hearts can open, even in the spite of them having closed. It's my experience may be different than your experience, but I want to understand.
That's a really beautiful place to come from, is I want to understand and I care about you.
A true 4 on the Enneagram will want to understand over and over. Tell me, I really want to know.
Yes. And we want you to try to understand too. Don't you want to understand me? Yeah, I'm really mad at you right now because you don't understand me. Yeah. We're both 4s.
Yeah, tell us about this card deck.
Yeah.
And it was a lot for working with couples over the years, realizing what you said is that a lot of those, like, we know, again, there's some couples that are in dire straits and really need a severe repair, but there's a lot of couples where it's like, overall it's good and we know we love each other, but gosh, we just keep criticizing, or I'm blaming or shaming or attacking, and I'm in pattern. And we realize how much of that is burning up the relationship chi, or what would be said is like the love bank account in other terms. And so really learning to clean those things up can really restore a lot more of that energy that we can use for romance and flirtation and love and laughter and playfulness and, frankly, fueling our own purposes in the world. And so cleaning up criticism, for example, is a biggie. I don't know how deep we want to go into withdrawal and pursuit patterns of attachment styles. That might be a little bit more advanced, but sometimes we'll just leave it at sometimes criticism happens. And while you could say, yeah, the person that's criticizing should be more aware, I think it's two to tango. And I think it can be actually more helpful if the person that's being criticized can reflect it back to them so they can see it, because the person that's criticizing is usually less resourced. And so by like the principle is to reflect it back to them, right? And then redirect them to something else so that we can reconnect. So for example, Leah brings criticism and I could use either vulnerability or question. A vulnerability would be like, ouch, that hurt. And redirect, can you say that in a different way? Or that critical? And the act of asking a question elicits a different part of the brain. So instead of me being kind of fixed in my pattern, you ask me the question and I have to say, was that critical? And if I'm being honest with myself, it was. And so then you say, can you say it in a different way? And it's going to force me to take a breath and like, think of how can I say that in not a critical way? Right. And in that moment, then there's the opportunity to reconnect. So that's an example of a common disconnection pattern that really erodes the goodness of our bond.
I love that. That is really helpful. Is when you think you're being criticized, just take a moment and go, is that true? And then if you're still not sure, like, in fact, maybe make it a habit to go to ask. And then that person gets a chance to like have a do-over. I'm a big fan of do-overs.
Yeah, and it helps them come closer to what's actually true for them. And instead, I mean, the common thing is for the other person to feel criticized and then to criticize back, right? And then you've got this like
collapse, and they're either shut down and withdraw love, or they attack back. And then that things were great. We had an amazing Sunday, and then all of a sudden, one comment in the kitchen as we're making dinner, like, then takes us on this whole thing where there's disconnection and then jabs and further disconnection. And before you know it, there's a fight, but it was that original comment that started it off. And so the thing to think about is, how many times would you, like, if you realize that every time you bring criticism, like since we're practicing this tool now, every time that criticism comes out of your mouth, you're going to get reflected back the question, was that critical? Can you say it in a different way? It doesn't tend to take you too many times before you just want to kind of skip that step. And you start to have a moment where there's the choice point of, I know that if I say this in the critical way, they're just going to shine the mirror back to me and I'm going to fucking have to say it in a different way anyways. Yeah. So I'm just going to have an evolutionary moment and say it or not say it and take a breath and release it.
Can you say the difference between, if I were to respond, was that critical, versus, are you criticizing me?
Or even more, that stop being critical. Right? Yeah.
So I love that. Was that critical?
The question is important.
Yes. Because you could take that and warp it a little bit, and then it's like, it's a dig back.
Totally. Brilliant. How about this one? Did you notice anything just shifted?
Oh, yes.
Really safe and spacious, right?
So these are the cards, right? This is in the card deck, correct?
This is in the cards, yeah. So there's three different categories. One is disconnection patterns, which we've just been talking about. Criticism, aggression, blame, shutdown, shaming, and then the connection catalysts. So these are tools to help create reconnection when we shut down. Willow, what's it like inside you right now?
Well, it's quite delightful inside of me right now. I had a great day.
Where is it delightful?
I'm in Portugal.
That's an invitation into closeness and connection, right? And then the third thing is the emotion states, and everything from the unpleasant states to some of the higher states of pleasure and joy and ecstasy and bliss. And so it helps, and there's body components where it helps us, like we were talking about at the very beginning, like we feel certain emotions in our heart, joy and love and beauty and connection. And so it's helping people to describe what that feels like and even point to where in their body it is.
So with this card deck, then depending on where a couple is at, kind of in their stage of their relationship, they're going to use sort of the different segments of the deck.
Categories?
Is that how it goes? Is that
Yeah,
the best way to use it?
that's
Okay, cool.
correct.
Wow, how fun. How in depth. Deeply relating. Johnny Blackburn's card deck, y'all. Make sure you get it. We'll put it in the
Yeah,
show
we'll have
notes.
links. And you've got another deck of
Good
cards,
job.
so we'll have links to those.
Yeah, the other
Um,
one's called Getting Closer, and it's
okay.
questions to create connection. So those are great for date nights or just in the evenings where there's almost this endless, where Willow was talking about presence, like there's almost this endless well of discovery that we can
Mhm.
experience together. But a lot of times we lose that curiosity we had in the courting phase. And there's a certain state of curiosity that if I learn to feel that, I don't think of the answer as much as I just like allow my curiosity to take us somewhere that we both, didn't know possible. And in that way we can be deeply seen and felt and known. And in that way there's an ongoing romance where we're endlessly discovering. And that's not only just my preference is my favorite fruit or where I would like to travel, but the more we get into sort of the energy or the aliveness of our embodied experience, there's a moment to moment shift. And when we're really attuned and being able to sense someone when we're making love, like we're feeling moment to moment the circulation of aliveness or energy in our own bodily experience as well as within our partner. And from the masculine side, as we're sort of guiding this, that we're feeling moment to moment, did that for create more openness, more pleasure, or did that tighten her, and create more disconnection? So the more we're able to open our nervous system, the more body-based healing that we do, and the more practices to help open that, the more we're able to actually sense moment to moment this rich tapestry of energy and emotion and pleasure and aliveness that's circulating in us, that's changing and opening and enhancing and deepening moment to moment.
That
I know
sounds
it is
sexy.
sexy. And what I was just going to say is it really like it keeps you super attuned to what's going on for you. So there's this strong sense of self, capital S, right? There's this strong sense of sovereignty and autonomy and your truth. And so navigating from that place, there's this experience, we sort of are steeped in this culture that's like, okay, grow up, fall in love with somebody, where it's then you're like giving your power over to I'm falling in love with somebody. But there's another way of falling in love with somebody where it's like you are in love, like capital I, capital N, you are in love. And then they are in love. Like they know how to access that level of universal love inside of themselves, and then you are with each other in love. It's just completely different way of being in love with somebody.
Hmm.
I love that. I think like from movies and sitcoms and sort of pop culture, there's a sense that the honeymoon phase is what love is. And oftentimes, like it almost seems pretty intelligent by design that helps us to really bond and get in relationship before some of the patterns to heal start to come up. But unfortunately, we lack that context. And so then that's sort of the reference point, and we rely on only that early phase to open our hearts instead of realizing that this is sort of the instrument to feel the love that lives through all things. And being in love is actually learning to live with an open heart, not just as a concept, but as a felt experience moment to moment. I'll demonstrate, I'll scoot up here and demonstrate, like, and then more of my energy is kind of up in my mind. And then as I relax open, then this sort of relaxes and opens. And then there's sort of a warmth or an emanation where I'm really like, I feel like I can really relate to both of you. And then I'm actually able to feel aliveness all around. And it would be really useful if we thought of it in terms of the felt sense of living with an open heart. And when that happens, or we say, is my heart open right now? And if not, can I learn to open it? And that being our guidepost to getting back in love.
I really love how you were able to, it was like watching you come deeper into your body. For those of you who are listening, you can hear it in Johnny's tone of voice, the change of when he's starting to like expand, he's going deeper into his body. And then he just like, even your voice changed, Johnny, when you started to like move it out and permeate the space. I could feel it coming towards me. I could feel it going towards Willow. I could feel it like in the room that you're actually sitting in. And this is where I think the spiritual element starts to create a larger impact, because most of us, when we're falling in love, are hit with the biology of our system, right? Our brain actually releases chemicals that give us the sensations that put us into a feeling of an opioidic state of bliss, right? Like those chemicals get released that make us want to get close together. And like, this is what gets us in the relationship to begin with. And then as the time goes on and the brain chemistry wears off, this is all just like biological. It's happening by itself. It doesn't take any conscious thought for us to make that go. But as the relationship goes on and we can't rely on the biology to do all the work for us, to keep us in those peak states, how do you stay in a state that fosters more of that between the two people?
Yeah. I've seen some research that now some people are thinking that the honeymoon phase doesn't necessarily, like, again, we're saying the honeymoon phase is when the heart's open, right? And then there's some of the newness, oxytocin, biochemicals. But one of the things that they think happens is that a lot of the criticism is not cleaned up. And so then there's little moments of a regrettable moment. And all of a sudden there's like these little micro daggers, and all of a sudden our heart's not open. Because when our heart's open, like we are releasing some of those chemicals of bliss. It doesn't have to only be in the peak moments. It's when the anatomy is open. Like I can sit here and feel joy without watching a movie or without having some event happen, right? And so when we really learn to master our embodied experience, we realize that like I feel love, like, or bliss. And so these states that's part of the third deck and the third section in the cards, is helping us to really not only learn how to feel feel and release sadness or frustration or shame or anger, but also learn how to be able to access and in any moment feel and transmit some of the other states. And we do this in retreats. And it's just really powerful to be in a group field where other people help you to be able to find that in yourself and be able to allow yourself to feel it and then be able to release it. It's such an important skill, this emotional freedom.
I'm curious about, so what might one of these cards read? Is it telling you a practice, something to do for this segment of the cards?
So for the emotion state, it's there. One side of all the cards is insights. So it's giving you insight to like what might be happening when criticism's happening, and how allowing your partner to criticize you over time is actually a disservice to both of you, and sort of explaining certain insights. And then whereas, so with bliss, for example, it's talking about some of the like how we feel it, and then some of the practices that people who are able to feel this on a regular basis tend to do. And so if you're interested in that, then you can kind of do some of those practices. But it's like, for example, with anger, it's making the distinction between anger and aggression, and showing how healthy anger contained within our own kind of sphere is actually essential for healthy boundaries and being able to say no. It's important for self-respect. It's important for sometimes illuminating something needs to be looked at. And, you know, you could think of anger as fire, right? It's like a torch illuminating something to be looked at. Or another version of it is standing up to injustice. You know, you look at social justice figures like Martin Luther King, and he was a great example of using that fire to inspire and capture people to help, evolve that. And then lastly, to like determination and kind of overcoming obstacles. Instead of kind of collapsing or getting frozen and stuck, I can use that fire to like help me to get to a higher order level of energy that helps me to rise above the obstacle. So all of those 5 things are really essential and really useful in our life as a human. And yet many of us disown anger or fire or power, right? Because perhaps we've had it used in distorted ways against us. But helping people to reintegrate that and being able to, again, have the healthy boundaries and have the sense of self-respect and sort of empowerment within themselves,
what I like about what these cards sound like they're doing is it's helping you cultivate another way of being with yourself so that whatever is arising, none of it's bad, but we can build a skill set that allows us to be really purposeful with that and to own it, right? But not necessarily create destruction with it, but to use it more purposefully in a positive. Well, I don't really want to use the word positive, but to be more purposeful with it.
So
I'm curious what thing you're curious about, Willow.
You're curious about what?
We're curious about your curiosity.
Yeah, Willow, I'm curious about your curiosity. What's something you're curious about?
In life, in general?
Relationships or sexuality?
In this moment.
Relationships and sexuality, what am I curious about? Well, many things, but I guess in this moment, just like how to navigate somebody's truth when it is incredibly uncomfortable, yet you really value it. And yeah, how do you come back home to your essence? How do you come back home to your own inner beloved when you get shaken, when you get thrown off by what's true for your partner? And even though you're grateful and you value that they're being honest with you, it's like it's not what you had in mind.
Willow,
it wouldn't be your preference?
Willow, I'm hearing that you're curious of how to stay in your own center while your partner is expressing their truth, which feels very uncomfortable to you.
Yes.
And so that was an example of modeling that even if I don't agree with you, or even if I'm having discomfort arise in me, that there was a part of my awareness that's still able to include you and what you expressed in the relation. And so for me, that the first step would be that can I respect you enough to reflect back or repeat back what I heard you say, even if I don't agree with it. And in that way, it automatically creates two perspectives.
And perspective is huge. It's so important.
And then what I would probably do if I was the one experiencing the discomfort is that I might be vulnerable and share like what the sensations that I was experiencing. Like I hear that's your truth and you have every right to think and feel that. And when I hear you say that, I notice my stomach gets tight. And I notice there's some fear that arises from me.
I can't breathe.
My diaphragm feels tight and I can't breathe. The formula in that is that I repeat back what I heard you say, because you were showing your own vulnerability and expressing your truth. And so then I reflected back what you said, and then I could share my vulnerability and the impact of what you said on me. And now we're both, it's safer because we've both got vulnerability in there and we're both able to like host both of our experiences.
Yeah. So we're creating a trust and vulnerability loop, essentially. Like I trust myself enough to speak my truth to you that you can hold it. So that's a vulnerability. And then you're like, oh, they're being vulnerable. I can be vulnerable back and trust them with my ability to be present. Intimacy, baby. That's intimacy.
I just want to say for the listeners out there, over the course of what we've been speaking about, there may be some things where you're like, oh yeah, I do that. That makes sense. And there may be other things where it feels new to you. And the invitation is what happens inside you when you come across a new way of being or potential that you don't yet know. Do you tend to experience confusion and you didn't take it in? Do you tend to deny that or have skepticism come up? Or do you notice that there's a curiosity that even maybe if you haven't experienced that yet, or maybe if this is the first time you've heard it, that there's a part of you that can stay open to that possibility.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So I imagine that what might be going through the minds of people who are just listening to that beautiful interaction is, okay, but what if I'm the one that's experiencing the like, I can't breathe and okay, that's your answer and I can accept that, but it still aches. There's still an achiness. And a lot of people want to like resolve the discomfort. They want to resolve the ache. So, what do you have to say about that?
It goes back to what we were talking about with the acceptance and the finger trap. And when either I'm feeling it and I want to get rid of it, or my partner's feeling it and I want to fix them, which some of us guys are really good at, that anxiety and trying to get rid of it actually tends to lock it in place.
True that.
It's really helpful when working with couples, either just as a pair or in kind of workshop and retreat settings, is to do exercises where we help the guys. It's like a lot of guys like the playbook, like, okay, you're going to start, you're wide receiver, and you're going to break right, and then you're going to cut left, and you're going to run fly route. And you're like, cool, I can do that. 1, 2, 3. And so if for the guys that have a tendency to want to like stifle her emotions or fix her or cheer her up or talk out of it, it's actually can be dismissive or disorienting or enraging for someone. And so we help the guys to be able, like, we unhook their responsibility. We have them actually listen to what the partner would really prefer. And then sometimes the guys are able to really easily do that. Cool. I just need to know how to do it. Okay. So I'm going to sit here and breathe. And you want me to sense my body and relax this place and just let her express. Okay. That's easy. And for some guys, it's just that they needed to know how and what to do. And other guys, you have to actually work through, because there may be a little bit of work. There may be a part of them that has a little bit of emotional codependency where they're uncomfortable and they're having difficulty being with their own discomfort when their partner's expressing emotion. And so those are a couple of the common ones. There's a few little subtleties, a few smaller ones, but those are the most common ones. Sometimes it could be helpful and again, we're generalizing because this can go both ways, but it can be really helpful for the person to kind of unhook the patterns that inhibit them from really just sitting in presence while their partner's feeling and expressing.
Okay, so what if, though, you're the one, right, who's having the discomfort? It's not necessarily you want your partner to stop being uncomfortable, but you're the receiver of the, like, oh, like they didn't say what I hoped they would say. And now I wouldn't be ethical to try to change their mind, but I really wish their mind could be different, but it's not. So now I'm stuck with this like ball in my chest or this tightness in my belly. And, how do you help them stay in the presence of that, right? When our urge, the first thing we want to do is like get away from it, right? We want to separate from that icky feeling.
So you explained 3 different beautiful awarenesses in there. Ideally, if I was able to be with some of the emotional sensations undefendedly, I would say, I'm noticing there's a ball in my chest when I hear you say that. And then I can ideally feel that, and we can have a really beautiful intimacy as I'm just simply feeling that and not talking. Now, my experience in working with people and helping them develop emotional intelligence over time is, for a lot of people, it starts off just a sensation. And like we were talking about at the beginning, it's helpful to develop a language and a familiarity with this. But in the beginning, if they have the context that like it's normal for you to just be aware of the sensation and start there, I think it really helps to relieve a lot of pressure for people. So they may just notice a ball of tension. And then as they're learning to feel that and it unfolds a little bit, then it may reveal itself as like, I notice there's a little part of me feeling disappointed and hearing what you said. And I want to allow you to have your own experience and let you know that that's totally cool what you said. And I'm just feeling a little disappointment. And now just saying that helps it release. Boom. And now I'm back open. We're both strong and connected. So that's if those are 2 scenarios, if I was able to allow myself to feel it. If I was not able to allow myself to feel it, then I out myself and could say something like you said, Leah, like, I notice there's a feeling here and I'm wanting to run away from it, or I'm wanting to talk and skirt around it. And the more that I'm able to do that sort of, it's almost like we're the larger field of awareness and these smaller parts arise within that. But when I get hijacked only as one part, then I sort of get stuck in it. And so by taking a meta perspective or a view of the process itself and naming it, a lot of times that allows it to be a smaller part that can sort of arise and relax rather than be hijacked by it. Does that make sense?
That's really helpful. I think the ding 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 I'm getting from what you just said, it's like, despite the like rawness or the tenderness or whatever that sensation is, and also like if you can zero in on where you're feeling it, is it taking over your body, or do you feel it in your gut? Like, I know for me, I'll feel the tension in my gut, and then it kind of moves up into my heart. And like you said, like naming it helps, it's less tight. And then if you can find ways to just breathe into where it continues to kind of feel a little crunchy or owie, and you just keep on giving that a little bit of breath, that breath allows some of the tension to relax. And I know sometimes for me, if it's really hard to move, it can be helpful to go, what does this remind me of? And in that question, there's a realization that, oh, this isn't so personal. I remember feeling this then, and then feeling it then, and then feeling it then. And it's just like, oh, okay, so this is just like, it's opening up a place in me where I have felt tender before. And I survived that. And I'm going to survive this too, and then the softening just keeps on happening. And in that book, Untethered Soul, he gave me, like, I think my gem from that book was, he said something about when your heart is closed, just keep bringing one breath at a time. See if that one breath at a time can just give you a little bit more space. And like, that's your only job. It's just like one more breath, and see if that can give you a little more space. And that's like it's like a simple job to do that can help you like in that present moment. So anyways, I guess my whole point in saying that is relaxation. Like there's something about where can you relax that can free you and liberate you?
So honestly, like I feel like a lot of people can relate to what you just described, Leah. And I think in that same way that we can learn to have really beautiful intimacy and closeness with our partner, if an uncomfortable pattern comes up in our body. And in that same way, we can attune, connect, and be with the nuance of it. Is that same way we were talking about earlier, that we can really deeply make love and moment to moment be feeling the shifts and the nuances of aliveness. And in that way, both of those experiences, whether it's repairing a disconnection or deepening in the ecstatic throes of lovemaking, that both of those places are our relationship with spiritual practice, that they're doorways into presence and relaxing the exclusive contraction of my mind and my sense of self, and opening in the deep intimacy of connectedness with my partner in all of life.
Love it. Yes.
Love it.
And so we have so many amazing offerings from Johnny. We've got these cards to help you make your way through what it means to be in spiritual partnership. And he also has a couple books, really powerful books. I've read them both cover to cover. Very, very.
What are the names? The titles.
What's the name of the big one? Kind of like a textbook.
Embodying Presence.
Internal Rising is more like poetry.
And inspired writings and poems. And then the third one that's set to come up next spring is Eternal Loving. So there's a 3-part series of the Eternal books, and I'm really excited about that one.
Awesome. What else are you going to have coming up that you want our audience to know about?
I have a program called Mystics, and we define a mystic as someone who can directly feel the presence of something greater than themselves, and then whose work, life, and relationship are inspired by that deeper grace and presence. And so we're fortunate to be alive in a time where many previous mystics throughout the ages were persecuted and killed for what was spoken blasphemy. But we're alive in a time right now where it seems like Spirit wants to kind of live through us and use us as instruments to evolve our world and bring more love and evolution to organizations and families and social structures. So we work with the change makers who actually feel the presence and then help to activate them. And so we have a program for individuals, and then we also have a program for couples that's called Amore, to love. And so that's a really fun way to just do all of the stuff we were doing. And I really like, Will and I were geeking out on this, like we really love experiential like scenarios that help us to, it's so playful that you forget you're actually learning, and yet you're experiencing a lot of these elements that we were talking about. And yeah, you're just so engaged in it because of the way that it was curated. So that I geek out on that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So the people that we know who have been through Johnny's retreats and workshops and programs get deep, deep transformation from it. So we will definitely be having his website and links and all of his offerings in the show notes for those of you who are ready for deep transformation and to tap into your own inner mystic. It's very exciting. Thank you so much, Johnny. We've had so much fun with you today.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you. It is so fun. And I really respect and appreciate both of you. And thank you for all the work that you've done to be the being that you are, and for all of the brightness that shines through you and all of the transformation and what you're doing with this particular project. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're awesome, Johnny. We love having you on, and we'll have you on again.
We will.
Love, love, love.
Ciao, everyone.
Now, our favorite part, the dish.
Dish time, dishity doo dah, dishity yay. We're gonna dish on Johnny Blackburn.
My oh my, what a fun
it's been so
day.
delightful.
Oh, Johnny. Yeah. So, what are your first thoughts having come from?
Well, I mean, I do really love the way that he speaks to the transformation that a person can have if they so choose to, because it is work, it is a practice, it is something that does require presence, acceptance, attunement, embodiment. And so I just love how he weaves it all together. And one of the things that I really value about his work is that he gets people to go through transformation from a somatic level, from a place of being in their bodies rather than just in their heads. You can only, and he's a therapist. So like as a talk therapist, the sort of kind of trap for talk therapy is like that you're just talking over stories and you're going over stories in your head and you're not actually getting into your cellular body to make those shifts that are required for you to have a new path forward, so you stop playing out the old patterns that those stories perpetuate.
Yeah, I really value who he is as a therapist and his style because of just what you said. It's like helping people turn towards the sensations that they're having in their body as it relates to whatever's up in the moment. So I think what he's teaching people is how to resolve conflict or even deeper understanding of the self through paying attention to the body, tuning into sensation. And then if it's like a contraction, how can you bring relaxation so that the contraction can move? And I could see like how fast the overcoming stuff that you're not happy with in your life could occur by redirecting the present moment. Like instead of rehashing the past in a way that's like, after a while, it's just useless. You just end up staying stuck. And his method is really about freedom.
Yes, that's so true. And that there is that habit and that tendency inside of relationship to just cycle and to, we hear that from couples all the time. We're having the same argument over and over and we're just spinning in circles. We're not going anywhere. And so what he teaches, his methodology, is a fast track to getting out of those what I call wash cycles, where you're just like churning and churning. You don't know which way is up and you really don't know how to get out of it because you're just triggering each other back and forth. It's like a ping pong game. And what he teaches his students and his clients to do is to pause, really, and get in touch with their own truth so that they can move forward from that place. And I think that is something that pretty much all of us can practice, no matter where we're at on our journey. I think there's always room for improvement with this method of shifting more quickly away from disconnect and toward love.
I also appreciated his, like there's a way with, if we want to be free from our upset or whatever's going on, criticize outside something else, blame something else, become defensive. It's actually moving the energy slightly different, where instead of it's out to like where it's could be an attack, it's okay, let me see if I can move this by staying present, tracking sensation, and finding relaxation, and therefore moving the energy in a different way that doesn't necessarily go out into a force field that could create, all the things, all the unhappiness. At least I think that's what he was saying. I think part of my obstacle in the interview was, okay, do I understand his language? Because there were some things I really needed to sort of redefine to make sure that I knew what he was fully talking about, so that I could make a map and have it make sense to my
absolutely.
own life.
He does have his own language where, where I might say chi or somebody else might say energy, he uses the word aliveness, so he's kind of developed his own language through all of his trainings and through his experience, his vast experience as a therapist, as a practitioner of helping singles and couples find their way back to love and experience healing on all levels of humanness, the psychological, emotional, spiritual, and physical. And so one of the things we didn't really touch on too much in the interview, but I do know about his work, and when he does retreats and things like that, he's always doing these embodiment practices, so Qigong style practices. And he's sort of developed, I think, his own form of Qigong even. And so he's getting people tuned in with, like, he didn't use the word in the interview, but the Sushumna Nadi channel, which is the central column of light where all your chakras plug into. And so he did give us a beautiful visual of that. He gives us this example of, like, when you're really pissed off at your partner and he's like got this bubble around him and he's like, fuck, I'm steaming in this bubble. Like, I'm so irate. I'm so pissed off at my partner. But instead of throwing it at them, I'm going to actually breathe and run this energy and this breath through this central column until it dissipates enough that I can then meet my partner and communicate with kindness, really.
Yeah. I really appreciated how his tone of voice changes. And, for someone, he gave a good example of between, like, anger and aggression. And so when we're angry and it turns into aggression, it's like we're throwing that aggression out. And I can really relate to this because in a moment of anger where I'm pissed off about something, I really think I have the right. Like I have the right to be angry, God damn it. And so I can kind of just like it. I'd never realized that it was aggression. I didn't realize that my anger was actually, it's going so out so forcefully. And there is a subconscious desire to want to go, fuck you, see what this feels like. I don't mean to be that way. So his modeling of, like, having a bubble so that he has the right to be angry. And he gave some great examples about, like, healthy anger and why anger is important for us not to suppress, but in a way to contain the anger so you still get to express it and be healthy with it, but it's not turning into aggression where it then has the potential to wreak havoc on someone else's nervous system, because that's where we often have to, like, spend so much time on fucking repairing. And I know that personally.
Yes,
Damn it, Janet.
The days that it can take to repair after you've been triggering back and forth, playing the trigger ping pong game, the amount of energy that it takes to be in that separateness for those days and then to slowly make your way back to each other and back to love. That is so much energy that you could be spending on other stuff. So learning to circulate it in the moment it's going to save you so much energy in the long run. And it does take some energy to learn this stuff up front, but it is worth the investment.
Right. It also takes, a desire, a willingness to go, I want to increase my capacity. I want to increase my nervous system's capacity to be uncomfortable and to also allow other people who I'm in relationship with have their feelings and stay. Not necessarily bolt, but have a willingness to go, I don't have to fix you. I don't have to change you. I can actually be here with you in whatever you're feeling and know that that person will hopefully be striving to also be there for you in whatever you're feeling. When you brought in your example, right? So this idea of nobody needs to change, nobody needs to be fixed. But when we can make space for people to track what they're feeling by going into their body and connecting to sensation, right? It does require your willingness to increase your capacity to be around discomfort. Not only your own discomfort, but someone else's discomfort. And I felt like that got illustrated really well in your example regarding like vulnerability. And, you're already stepping up to the plate, making it okay for someone to feel and express whatever is true for them in the moment. And like, how do you stay in that when you don't really want them to feel that way? Like you wish they felt something different or were choosing something different, but you're also really committed to allowing them their truth. And I felt like discomfort, right? Like I felt my own discomfort of going, yeah, I've lived that out very much. And there is still a desire to escape the sensation that you're feeling when you can't influence someone else to feel differently, right? Like in some ways that wouldn't be loving or ethical on some level, right? So, but that doesn't mean you can just get out of the, like what do you do with that? And I thought his answer was really good. It's like really just staying in the present moment and then seeing if you can find the next relaxation point. Like, okay, you might have to just like pause and just be in it. Can you just tolerate it? Can you just be in it? And then it will pass.
Everything comes to pass. Everything is born to die. All the good, all the bad, it's all going to come to pass. So we can trust in that. That's one of the Taoist perspectives. It's like it rises to fall. It expands to contract. It comes to pass. So, we'd love to hear from you and what really came up for you as you were tuning in with Johnny's interview. So send us a DM or shoot us an email or whatever. Let us know.
Yeah. And please let all of your streaming services know that you like this podcast and you want this podcast to go far and wide all around the world. And you can do that by rating and commenting and giving us all the love.
We love you.
So get out there. And cyber hugs to all.
Ciao.
Love, love, love.
Thanks for tuning in. If the hosts seem to know what they were talking about, that's because they do. Leah Piper is a tantric sex master coach and a positive psychology facilitator. Dr. Willow Brown is both a Chinese and functional medicine doctor and a Taoist sexology teacher. Don't forget, your comments, likes, subscribes, and suggestions matter. Let's realize this new world together.